It says a lot about how strong WWE's in-ring year was that coming up with 10 noteworthy bad matches proved rather difficult. WWE's talented roster typically brought their A-game when it came to television and premium live event matches, making it a lot easier to remember those that were good. Were there some throwaway matches or matches that were just sort of there? Of course there were. There were also some duds, though a lot of what we've identified as below par belonged more in the disappointment category and not the outright disaster pile. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 worst WWE matches of 2024. Join us! Number 10, Seth Rollins vs Jinder Mahal on Raw. And we are kicking things off with a match that, as far as the actual in-ring work was concerned, was perfectly acceptable. Seth was on one of his rolls at this point, and Jinder, despite what some may think of him, is a solid enough wrestler and a credible threat against anyone when he's being booked credibly. But by this point, the modern-day Maharaja hadn't been booked credibly in an age. Hell, he'd barely been booked at all, and his improbable WWE title reign of 2017 felt like a very long time ago indeed. Inadvertently upping the stakes was AEW owner Tony Khan, citing the lack of logic in Mahal being granted a WWE World Heavyweight title shot in comparison to his own decision to pit Hook against then AEW World Champion Samoa Joe, which he believed had received undue flack from fans. With this in mind, some people genuinely believed WWE might go ahead and book Jinder to win the bout and the title as a way of getting back at Tony. It didn't happen, of course, and in the end it was a routine defense for Rollins, who suffered an injury during the contest. As for Jinder, he was released in April, making this his last hurrah. Number 9, The Pride vs The Final Testament at WrestleMania 40 Night 2. WrestleMania 40 must have felt bittersweet for Bobby Lashley. On the one hand, at least he made the card this time after his match with Bray Wyatt the previous year was cancelled. On the other hand, it was this match. Teaming with the Street Profits, Lashley took on Karrion Kross and the Authors of Pain in a Philadelphia Street Fight 6-man that also featured B-Fab and Scarlett. Oh, and Bubba Ray Dudley as special guest referee, and Snoop Dogg on commentary because, of course. A lot of stuff happened out there, and they certainly made use of the weapons, bringing in kendo sticks, trash cans, and steel chairs, but they were clearly rushing to fit as much as possible into their allotted 8.5 minutes. There was a lot of sloppiness too, with blown spots and mistimed moves, including the centerpiece table spot, and the AOP just seemed to bugger off at one point, never to return. A 6-man weapons-filled brawl with all the sports entertainment extras could and should have been more fun than this one was, especially considering the stage it was on. Number 8, Io Sky vs Sonia Deville on Raw. Right, to play devil's advocate right off the bat, it is worth mentioning that Sonia Deville hadn't wrestled in a year after tearing her ACL in July of 2023. So when she met the usually dependable Io Sky in just her 4th match back, a bit of rustiness could be expected and forgiven. But this wasn't just a bit of rustiness. And also, it wasn't just Deville who was having a bit of a stinker out there either. Because Io also seemed lost at times and messed up rudimentary things like a dropkick through the middle and bottom rope and bumped awkwardly for what looked like very basic offense on Sonia's part. Deville was off on a lot of spots and moves, however, and it was glaringly apparent that the two of them had poor chemistry with one another. It picked up at the end, and Sky managed to redeem things with some nice looking offense in the closing stretch, including a moonsault to the floor and one in the ring, but it wasn't enough to salvage a match that would have likely been described by Prime Jim Ross as bowling shoe ugly. Number 7, Liv Morgan vs Rhea Ripley at Bad Blood. One of the top WWE feuds of the year was the one between Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. The feud's heat increased several degrees at SummerSlam when Dominic Mysterio turned more heel and aligned himself with Morgan after helping to cost his mammy her shot at the women's world title. The SummerSlam match was really quite good, raising expectations for their rematch at Bad Blood, where, as an added stipulation, Dirty Dom would be locked in a shark cage. They tried to tell a story out there, with Ripley getting distracted by the suspended above the aisle Mysterio, allowing Morgan to take advantage and focus on the challenger's knee before they traded some near falls. There was a neat moment when Dominic fell out of the cage and ended up hanging upside down, but they really made a hash of the finish and ruined what hadn't exactly been a thrilling match to begin with. Raquel Rodriguez made her return and attacked Rhea for the DQ, though the original ending was supposed to be Liv scoring the pin after the interference. It was seriously a confusing and messy conclusion that did nobody any favors. Number 6, the Women's Royal Rumble match at Royal Rumble. Paul Triple H Levesque has received praise for his commitment to long-term storytelling and ability to book marquee matches effectively. That praise may be warranted, but the game can't seem to lay out a top-level Royal Rumble match for love nor money. The women's iteration from 2024 was another iffy one that felt like a major missed opportunity when it was over. There were some good moments, don't get me wrong, but those were few and far between. So while it was cool to see the return of Liv Morgan, the debut of Jade Cargill, and the surprise appearance of TNA's Jordynne Grace, who was the standout performer in the match by the way, the bulk of the contest was meandering and at times rather awkward. Bayley ended up winning the thing, setting a longevity record in the process, and the last few minutes were genuinely exciting. The match up until then, however, failed to stir the crowd, which could be attributed to a lack of real star power and the inclusion of many who were clearly just in the match to make up the numbers. Number 5, the Women's War Games at Survivor Series. Fans were initially thrilled when WWE made the decision to bring War Games to the main roster. A classic gimmick match, War Games represented something a little bit different and certainly made for a nice change of pace after years of battles for brand supremacy at Survivor Series. Well, it's probably fair to say the novelty has worn off a bit and that we might as well go back to battles for brand supremacy if the War Games matches are going to be like the women's division's effort from 2024. The big issue at play in this one was the feud between captains Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, a feud that had been going on for months by this point. There were a couple of neat spots here and there, but the modern day War Games tropes are well worn by now. Do they always need to bring a weapon with them when they enter the match? And at close to 40 minutes, it just went on for a bit too long. Also, I'm pretty sure that time actually stood still when Nia Jax dished out those chair shots. Ripley getting some revenge on Morgan for the finish was a nice moment, but the juice really wasn't worth the squeeze. Number 4, Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill versus the Kabuki Warriors at Backlash France. Backlash France was overall a tremendous premium live event enhanced by a rabid crowd and capped off with a fantastic main. The one down spot, it must be said, was the women's tag team title match with Asuka and Kairi Sane defending against Belair and Cargill. It started off well enough with Bianca doing most of the work for the challengers, while Jade got to look impressive by bouncing the champs around. Unfortunately, after Belair took some heat and gave the hot tag to her partner, things started to noticeably and rapidly fall apart. Cargill seemed to have a hard time being in the right place and positioning herself to take offense, while there was a weird momentum-killing moment where the referee rightly refused to count because Kairi wasn't the legal woman. From there, it was obvious that Jade and the Warriors were lost, and it took them a while to find the right page of the script. By the time they did, any spark the match had was well and truly gone. At 17 minutes, it was probably a good 3 or 4 minutes too long too, but at least the finish looked great and the title change was well received. Number 3, Bayley versus Nia Jax at Bad Blood. Bayley and Nia Jax had a rubbish and heatless match at SummerSlam where the role model dropped her title to the Irresistible Force, ending her reign on a dour note. Would they redeem themselves in the rematch at Bad Blood? No, the answer is no. Having to follow the classic Hell in a Cell war between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk put them in an unenviable position to begin with, and to give them credit, they at least started the match at a fairly brisk pace. However, it was a pace that they couldn't maintain, and the match plodded along in an uninspired fashion, even if Bayley did try to inject some excitement with her comebacks. Unfortunately, things really took a turn with Nia's laughable attempt at a Hurricane Rana and Bayley's bungled sunset flip into the turnbuckles. A couple more ropey moments and a silly ref bump led to Tiffany Stratton's failed cash-in attempt, which also featured a whiffed briefcase shot on Bayley, with the distraction allowing Jax to retain. You could see what they were going for here, but it simply didn't work. Number 2, Nia Jax versus Liv Morgan at Crown Jewel. About a month after dogging it against Bayley at Bad Blood, Nia Jax was once again given a big stage and a major match at a WWE premium live event. At Crown Jewel, Nia met Liv Morgan in a battle of the two women's champions. The winner would become the Crown Jewel champion, a strictly ceremonial title that was created to make the company's visit to Saudi Arabia seem more important than it actually is. Despite all the ceremony and circumstance, the Saudi faithful initially reacted with indifference to this one, and really, who can blame them? The action, such as it was substandard, even if Morgan did nail a nice satellite DDT and Jax hit a clean pop-up Samoan drop. After 5 or so minutes of uninspired wrestling, Tiffany Stratton showed up to yet again tease a cash-in that didn't happen, and just how old has that trope gotten, by the way, with Raquel Rodriguez and Dominic Mysterio running out to the aid of Liv. A kick from Raquel to Nia set up a weak-looking Oblivion to make Morgan the crown jewel champ. It seems strange to say given the performer's sometimes patchy performances throughout 24, but this still somehow managed to be a letdown. Number 1, Jey Uso versus Jimmy Uso at WrestleMania 40 Night 1. Right, so what the hell happened here then? Twin brothers Jimmy and Jey Uso had the grandest stage. They had a meaty storyline heading into their first time meeting, and they absolutely blew it. WWE clearly had high expectations for the first Uso versus Uso encounter, given that they booked it at WrestleMania and the brothers themselves had long talked about the banger they would inevitably have when they finally squared off. Sadly, this was the antithesis of Brett versus Owen. Hell, it didn't even come close to Matt versus Jeff. Because from the first minute, it was evident that Jimmy and Jey just didn't have good chemistry as opponents, and the match that they had with the endless super kicks and forced family drama fell flat en route to an anticlimactic finish. It was dispiriting to see tens of thousands of people simultaneously realize what a massive disappointment this whole thing was. Jimmy and Jey have actually both alluded to the fact that they weren't happy with it since. I mean, how could they be? Citing their time being cut and Jimmy's injury as contributing factors as to why it's so underwhelmed. Not very Usy, boys. Not very Usy at all.